Today's Coin Flip Podcast. Martin Kelly, Jacob Zimmerman, Jaimes Geren on another episode of NFL Talk. We are talking about NFL rookie quarterbacks today, specifically the three NFL rookie quarterbacks from this previous NFL draft: CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, and Anthony Richardson. Three good, talented quarterbacks. We'll talk about who has the highest ceiling, who's going to have the most successful year this year, and just a bunch of other random rhetoric talk to go with it. Jacob, let's start with you first. How's the Carolinas going, buddy?
Doing pretty solid out here, Martino. Looking to transition from one radio job to another. And I've had the opportunity to watch Bryce Young over this weekend. His first preseason game is in the books, although, he only had 6 passing attempts. There's still plenty to talk about, as well as the overall impact he could have coming from Alabama, going to the situation in Carolina.
James, you're in the southern part of Utah, which was all a place we all resided at one point, but you were the one that's left standing. How is the Demon Desert doing out there?
It's all right. It's all right. It actually hasn't been scorching hot, which is unlike southern Utah in most years, but no, it's in the mid-90s. It hasn't been really over the hundreds lately.
Yeah, July is mainly the month where we see 115. August is when we start finally get the mid-high 90s, and 80s will come back in September. You're not wrong there at all. All right, boys, to take over again, let's talk about 3 rookie quarterbacks in this draft: Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson. Bryce Young went to the Panthers. CJ Stroud went to the Houston Texans. Anthony Richardson went to the Indianapolis Colts. Let's start with the Panthers first. Jacob, you're the fan of this team. You watched Bryce Young play in his first preseason game. Like you said, he threw 6 passes. He didn't have a whole lot of offensive success, not putting up any points on the drive, but nonetheless, you thought you saw some good things. Explain to us why Bryce Young is going to be good, and explain why this preseason game showed that he will be good.
It's a pretty nice format here with the podcast we're doing, that I can talk about my team's quarterback and Bryce Young. James can talk about his team's new quarterback, Anthony Richardson. And Martin, you're pretty darn close. You have another Ohio State quarterback to talk about from CJ Stroud. We know you love Justin Fields. And I say that to say that the first snap the Panthers took on offense in that preseason game, we're recording this on a Sunday. It was Saturday when he lost to the Jets ultimately 27-0. But that first snap, Martin, I felt something I hadn't felt in maybe at least 5 years as a Panthers fan. And that was actual hope looking up at the TV screen when it comes to my football team. Now, everybody can dissect the preseason all they want to. I'll give you a little bit of that. I like that Bryce Young was out there throwing some medium distance passes. He wasn't just out there checking everything down. He wasn't afraid to get the ball out there quick. There was one time he held on to it a little long, wasn't much developing, took a sack for 9 yards, had another kind of a hurry, you could call it a knockdown, but ultimately he went 4 for 6 for 21 yards, just 3.5 average. But the 2 ones he missed, downfield, I like. He did overthrow a ball towards the left sideline, I believe, but not a whole lot of moving the football when it came for Bryce Young's preseason NFL debut. And, I'm not too worried about this because they played the New York Jets, and when Young was actually out there, there were some starters for the Jets on the defensive side of the football. Now, they didn't play the whole game. They weren't really out there a ton when Matt Corral was out there. And let's face it, everybody turns off the TV at the end of the first quarter, if not halftime, for some of these preseason games. But ultimately, Bryce Young, to know that he didn't look afraid against what is going to be a top 3 defense in the NFL, we suspect. Bravo, Bryce Young. I'm glad you went out there and you did your thing and you kind of ripped the Band-Aid off and you got a little bit of taste of the NFL. But I wanted to carry this conversation not only just on what Bryce Young did on Saturday. I want to talk about what I feel like his impact can be, and I imagine you guys will, have a similar conversation with this when you guys go up. But I just wanted to start things off by listing the Carolina Panthers quarterbacks over the last couple of seasons, because anytime a quarterback goes to a team, there's different expectations, right? Mac Jones has different expectations in New England than even someone maybe like Anthony Richardson does for the Colts. Or maybe that's not a great example because the Colts have had a great quarterback in the past too with Peyton Manning, but you understand what I'm talking about. Other than Cam Newton, the Panthers have had a really, really rough time at quarterback throughout their entire history, really. Jake Delhomme was average, kind of at best. And since Cam Newton, his prime came to an end around 2018, 2017, I wanted to list you the quarterbacks that have started for Carolina. I know our last podcast, I mentioned the Panthers were the only team in recent memory over, I can't remember if it's 3 or 4 or 5 years or so, that have thrown more picks than passing touchdowns. And here's why. 2018, Taylor Heineke starts game as well as Kyle Allen. Kyle Allen then starts the first 12 games of 2019. Or 12 of them. Cam Newton's out there for 2. Will Grier, for crying out loud, is out there for 2 as well. Teddy Bridgewater started 15 games for the Panthers in 2020. P.J. Walker got 1 in 2021. It was Sam Darnold 11. Cam Newton came back for 5 games. P.J. Walker played 1. Last year, Baker Mayfield got 6. Darnold got 6. And P.J. Walker got 5. I just named a lot of backup, if not third-string quarterbacks around the NFL right now. Transition to what Bryce Young did. Now, there's the comparison. Everybody likes to do it every couple of years when there's a really good national championship team of, could this team, snag a win in the NFL? Could they go 1-16? Could they go 2-15 or whatever? And every decade or so, every 5 years or so, there's that conversation. Now, in recent memory, that conversation has been around Georgia. Taking a peek at the 2021 game logs for Bryce Young, the closest thing to an NFL team he's seen in his career. Guys, Alabama's run game has kind of disappeared over the last couple of seasons, but you wouldn't know it because Bryce Young threw for 369 yards in that game on 57 attempts. Everybody in the entire stadium knew Bryce Young was dropping back, and he still threw for 369 against Georgia in the national championship game. This is a guy who I think has the experience. Everybody wants to talk about his size. He's listed as 6 foot in his college stats. He's probably not even that. He's probably not as tall as I am. But man, there are some more things to unravel here. I took the time to look into the 2022 passing stats as a team. Because, basically 3 quarterbacks split even time for the Panthers. And when it comes to passing yards, as a team, the Panthers were bottom 5. Passing touchdowns, they were bottom 4. Quarterback rating, bottom 6. First downs, passing first downs, second, only to your Bears, Martin. Carolina has been in some deep waters in their quarterback situation as of late, and I don't think it necessarily takes a breakout Rookie of the Year season for Bryce Young to match, if not improve, the win total of the Panthers from last year. But ultimately, expectations are what they are. Everybody's going to doubt Bryce Young off of his height alone. He will have some passes batted down in the first couple of weeks of the season. I'm expecting that. But by late in the year, I think with the additions of, coming off a Super Bowl appearance, Miles Sanders, an average tight end for a contender, Joe Burrow's one of his targets, Hayden Hurst. We went and snagged the all-reliable Adam Thielen from Minnesota, and DJ Chark, if he's healthy, can give you a little bit of something. No other team in the offseason with a rookie quarterback surrounded their rookie quarterback with that kind of help. Based off of all of what I've said over the last 5 minutes, I think Bryce Young is in for a solid rookie season, and nothing I saw on Saturday changed that.
Not bad. Not bad. I'll applaud you for that. Bryce Young should be in the driver's seat to have the best career out of the 3 of these guys. He should be. He was the first overall pick, and based on that alone, your ceiling is already set higher than the other 2. With that being said, Jacob, you made a lot of great points. But all of that goes to wash if the Carolina Panthers cannot figure out that offensive line. There were times where, and it was on his first pass attempt, if I'm not mistaken, he did end up actually completing the pass, which it was a 5-yard check down to his tight end. But he was getting drilled as he threw the ball. But he still completed it, so whatever. But how often can you afford your quarterback being pressured like that constantly? And the Jets do have a good front seven. And yes, I know it may have been some backups, but there were some starters out there for the Jets. And Ikem Ekwonu is a nice addition for the offensive line. And he's grown over the last couple of years. I just don't know if that's going to be enough. I'm a fan of the Colts, and we all know the story of Andrew Luck. Very talented quarterback, didn't have an offensive line in front of him, and eventually just broke down. I'm not saying that that's going to be Bryce Young because I didn't see him necessarily try to look for contact when he was escaping from pressure, but he is a small dude, and that sometimes can catch up to you. Look at Kyler Murray. He's roughly the same build as Bryce Young. If he might be a little thicker, and look at him, he's all banged up, and he's a mobile quarterback. And mobility may not be a first option for Bryce Young, but it's definitely something that he can do when it's needed. He has the ability to escape that pressure and gain a couple of yards if he needs to. But I know that's not what he wants to do. He wants to be a pocket quarterback. But you look at his day, 4 for 6, whatever, there wasn't a whole lot to look at. 5-yard check down, a 5-yard outside hitch, which he completed. And he did overthrow Chark. He completed a running back flat for no yards. And then he had another 4-yard hitch check down to his tight end. So it almost seemed like the playbook was not really open for Bryce. And for someone who's very familiar with Frank Reich, who knows his playbook, I was kind of surprised that I didn't see more from Frank Reich. Because you mentioned that the Panthers haven't had any quarterbacks, and this is probably the best quarterback that they've had since Cam Newton. And now you bring in a guy who and Frank Reich's a very crafty play caller. Like he's very unique with what he does. And sometimes it's kind of like, why the heck are you doing that? Like there was a couple of plays in that game where I think it was 4th and very short, and they went for it. I don't remember if they got it or not, but I just remember seeing them lined up on 4th and 1. And I said, well, that's going to be a familiar sight all season because Frank Reich loves to gamble on those 4th and short situations. And to not have a single read option in there for him, to not have a play action in there for him, it was kind of a little like, all right, how come this playbook isn't a little bit more open to Bryce yet if he's truly our guy? Maybe because it's week 1, whatever. But I didn't see as much promise as I would have liked to see in week 1. And you mentioned the weapons as well. Thielen is past his prime, but he is a good veteran presence to that locker room. And DJ Chark, I don't know. Like like you said, if he can get a whole season together, then he can be nice. He showed flashes in Jacksonville, but it's been a few years since that. And the running game, didn't see a whole lot from there. I know we'll see Miles Sanders in the regular season. With that being said, if this playbook can open up, which by default it's going to, I just wasn't really impressed by Bryce. I mean, he didn't lead him to a single point, didn't even get him in the field goal range. So I know you can't dissect preseason football all that too much, but I was just a little surprised to see how close the playbook seemed to be for Bryce. So I don't think personally he's going to have the best season. We'll get to that in a second, but I didn't see anything horrible from this game from Bryce, and I think that should be the most important thing.
One thing I quickly want to say before, Martin, you give your thoughts on this before we move on to your segment, Martin. You mentioned Kyler Murray. I feel like Bryce Young off the field has checked all the boxes that you could want him to check. I feel like he has been solid with the media. He has initiated himself very well with the captains of the team in Carolina. And when I think about recent memory, when it comes to college football, other than, and I'm talking about guys who have reached a solidified level in the NFL. Some guys might be on the way to becoming that, but I feel like when you look a lot of the recent stars in college football who have been playing in the college football playoff, a lot of them have turned out well so far. Trevor Lawrence has turned out nicely. Joe Burrow's turned out nicely. A ton of people are super high on Justin Fields coming into the season. If the trend follows, Bryce Young will also be that guy. Martin, go ahead.
I'll make this short. Sorry about that, guys. Jacob knows how I really feel about Bryce Young, and that's off the podcast, but that's just between me and him because we like to have a little bit of a bitter rivalry between us about the Bears and the Panthers. That's totally there. But Jacob, James, you guys have both harped on it. I won't stop harping on it. He's short. He's not tall enough to see over the offensive line. And you know what, James, I'm glad you brought it up about Andrew Luck getting killed behind the offensive line. Guess what? Kyler Murray's getting killed behind his offensive line. And it isn't just because that he has a terrible offensive line. It's also because Kyler Murray can't see anybody downfield. Kyler Murray can't do anything. Throw the ball 40, 50, 60 yards without trying to scramble outside the pocket and finally find them, okay? If Frank Wright is doing a bunch of checkdowns and simple pattern plays in the first few preseason games with Bryce Young's not going to be able to grow. And that's why I still question for Frank Wright. I understand he has success, but I don't trust him as a play caller. And, I mean, there's the debate between him and Peterson, what happened in Philadelphia, but that's a different story for a different day. My point is, Bryce Young looked like a rookie quarterback. I mean, that's the truth. All three of these guys look like rookie quarterbacks. None of them flashed out of the preseason. None of them stood out in any significant way. Two of them threw interceptions on their first passes. So is there anything really to hype up a lot? No, because Bryce Young had one drive and didn't even put any points on the board. So, we got to see and wait. And, week one will really tell us what these guys are and what the season will look like. But to me, Bryce Young is too short. Bryce Young had a great junior season in college football. That's when he had Jameson Williams and John Mechie. And then the next season, he goes from 4,500 yards to 3,600 yards and 44 touchdowns to under 40 touchdowns. So it was either Alabama or Bryce Young. Still, nonetheless, point is he didn't have the same success the next season when he, went into his final year in college. And so we'll see what really is going on. And the NFL will tell us the entire truth. For right now, Bryce Young to me is short. Bryce Young isn't ready yet. We'll see what Frank Wright does with his play calling. There's nothing really to talk about with the Panthers just yet. And Bryce Young is just Bryce Young. So we'll segue away from Bryce Young. And
wait, did you say he missed 3 games last year? Jacob?
Well, Martin was talking about his stat drop-off, and it was because he missed 3 games. That was why.
Right. Was he academically ineligible? Was he off this field? What was the reason that he missed 3 games?
He was banged up.
He was injured. Exactly. Okay, carry on. That's all I wanted to say.
But you guys are talking about this guy like he's a midget, like he was hitting the Alabama offensive lineman in the back of the helmet with a football every time. That's not what happened. If he was able to
I'm
in the
not saying
SEC,
it was.
He can put it in the right spot. He can get over the big guys.
And he's also getting hurt in the SEC. And what's to say he's not going to do that in the NFL?
All right, we'll leave this debate for another day for you two. Let's segue to another SEC quarterback, the other SEC quarterback to come out and get
going
drafted.
In order.
James.
We're going in order.
All right. We'll go to C.J. Stroud. Fine, we'll throw me into the fire. Okay, let's go C.J. Stroud. He got picked 2nd overall, Houston Texans. Now, I will take a little longer on this one because I'm the one that's defending CJ Stroud. And you know what? Like I said, no rookie quarterback stood out in this preseason. CJ Stroud threw an interception on his first play. I'm not sure where he was throwing the football. It was a comeback route from the wide receiver, and to me, CJ Stroud threw it early and low instead of ahead and away. So I'm not, I'm not CJ in that moment, but he did scramble outside the pocket, so maybe that screwed up the timing. I look at what CJ has in Houston offensively, and Jacob touched on this with what talent that Bryce Young has in Carolina. Yes, he has Miles Sanders. Yes, he has Adam Thielen. Guys that were in the playoffs, guys that were in Super Bowls. That's a lot of great experience, and I 100% tip my cap to that. But I believe CJ Stroud's got the best young, up-and-coming talent. And I think it's not even close. And, yeah, James brought this up when we did the over-unders. Robert Woods is the number one wide receiver in Houston. That's not a great number one wide receiver. I mean, if Robert Woods couldn't outdo A.J. Brown when they were in Tennessee, there's no way Robert Woods is going to stand out enough in Houston to be the next electric wide receiver in the NFL. I'm sorry, that's just not the truth. But Dameon Pierce, Dalton Schultz, you got Laramie Tunsil on the offensive line. You got, I have their depth chart right in front of me. You also have Shaq Mason, who's been a former Pro Bowl in this league. And you have Noah Brown, John Mechie, and Tank Dell. Now, John Mechie didn't play last year. Tank Dell played in the preseason, but Tank Dell wasn't that bad. He's a short wide receiver out of Houston. He went to the Houston Texans. It kind of makes sense, but Tank Dell was an electrifying wide receiver in college. Noah Brown, he's been around the league. He's got to be the electric breakouts start out of all these guys. And he was with Bryce Young in his junior season when they lost to Georgia. So he is projected to be one of these top flight receivers. If he can take the next step, you have Noah Brown, Dalton Schultz, you have a solid running game with Dameon Pierce and Devin Singletary when Devin is healthy. I think CJ's got the best talent, and I think he's got the best up-and-coming talent to help him actually grow. CJ, to me, is not a typical Ohio State quarterback. People will harp on that, and I get that. But Justin Fields, CJ Stroud weren't wide receivers converted to quarterbacks or potential quarterbacks that possibly could be quarterbacks. These guys were pocket passers. They legitimately threw for over 4,000 yards in their seasons at Ohio State. They were lighting up the board. CJ had the best wide receiver duo. JSN, Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm not going to deny that. That's electrifying talent that you can win with your eyes closed. Seriously. But I think CJ has the best arm, the best touch. I think CJ will have the most success in his career. That's just me. But for this season, I think if Houston can figure out their offense, I think CJ has the best chance to show that he is the best quarterback out of this entire draft. And I think his young talent, if they step up the way they're projected to, and his offensive line gives them enough time, I think CJ Stroud could be the best one. So my case for CJ Stroud being the best one out of all these guys is the talent they've surrounded him with that are going to elevate CJ Stroud because they actually believe in CJ Stroud, which is the question marks I have for Indy and for Carolina, which is why I'm not taking their quarterbacks. To me, CJ Stroud is the best one out of all three.
James will go ahead and take this one. CJ Stroud. I was high on CJ Stroud, and I think I still am high on this guy. Getting a good look at him last year, battling it out in that tough conference. You know, having to face a rival like Michigan. He's been in some high-pressure games. He's been in the college football playoff. He's had that experience. If there is a guy who I feel like from a passing perspective, from an accuracy perspective, can break the mold of the Buckeye quarterbacks being busts in the NFL, I think it would be CJ. CJ Stroud, I think, you know, there's not a lot you can pull from these preseason games. You can look at his numbers and say, 2 of 14, 13 yards, an interception. He was terrible. But the reality is, you almost want to have your starting quarterback, your rookie starting quarterback, have his picks be in the preseason as opposed to he gets out there first drive of week 1, the real deal, and he throws an interception. Just think about it realistically. If you have that first, kind of practice pick under your belt, if you do throw a pick in the first quarter in week 1, it's not going to be as much of an avalanche as it could. So that's a positive, actually, to pull out that C.J. Stroud. At least he's not, scared to throw the football out there. John Mechie, he could really turn into something, Martin. I like that argument. I think on the defensive side of the football, there's some guys that have a high turnout as well. Will Anderson especially. He got a solo tackle the other day. But when it comes to C.J. Stroud, this narrative with Buckeye quarterbacks has just been crazy. And if he can truly overcome that, that'll be something. Because this is coming on one of those streaks that you almost put that into your parlay when something becomes so consecutive with Buckeye quarterbacks not being able to pass in the NFL. But C.J. Stroud, I think he's got some high potential. We haven't seen much of him. Ultimately there wasn't a lot of cues to point to that really swayed my opinion on this guy, but ultimately I think he has some high upside, and I think it's more about the play calling. It's more about the coaching staff, his quarterback coach, the offensive line, the receiver development around it. There's a lot that goes into it. James, I can recall you talking about Davis Mills the other week and how you thought he wasn't even that bad, and he still couldn't turn the team around. So C.J. Stroud, I think opposed to Carolina, different than Carolina and different than Indianapolis, I think C.J. Stroud might have the biggest hole to dig himself out of.
This is interesting because if you're talking about pure size and mechanics, C.J. Stroud is definitely number one in both of those. He's the best size for an NFL quarterback, and he's got the best throwing mechanics out of the three of them. With that being said, I don't necessarily agree with you, Martin, on the guys being around him that are going to be the reason that he's going to have the best season. The Texans are in my division. I see them twice a year. So I know how bad this team is. I know how bad this offensive line is. They're horrible. And say what you want, it is a Bill Belichick defense still, even if it isn't all starters. It's still a Bill Belichick mental group. And he didn't look very good out there. His 5-yard out route was the first pass of the game, which ended up going for a first down. It was the right throw. The second time he dropped back, he had time, but then he got sacked. The third pass, he escapes the pocket, and then he runs for 5 yards. The next time, he throws an interception on a comeback route, which he wasn't really getting over-pressured on, but it was off, way underthrown, and it wasn't even remotely close to where he was throwing it to. The next opportunity he gets, he throws a high screen pass on a blitz. Now, I know you got to get the ball out in that situation, but it was still a very completable ball, and he overthrew him. If he gets that pass completed, it probably goes for a first down. If he makes that first defender miss, that's kind of iffy, though. He gets pressured on the next passing opportunity. He looked very panicky as he was trying to escape the pocket. Throws it to a screen. Again, it was high, uncatchable, an incomplete pass. Then he gets a play action, and he rolls out to his left. He makes a couple of D linemen miss. And then he throws a little 5-yard completion towards the sideline. And then his last opportunity, can't find anyone open, so he tries to make something happen. He scrambles for 2. Now, yes, it is a Bill Belichick defense, and it is a very inexperienced offensive line for the Texans. But at no point at C.J. Stroud's game yesterday, at any point when he was on the field, did I think that he looked confident out there. He looks kind of nervous, and sure, you could say it's the same thing. It's the first time he's ever suited up. But this is the guy that everyone was kind of saying that the Panthers should be taking number one just because of his size. And we didn't really see a whole lot from CJ against New England. Davis Mills looked far beyond better than he did. I think he only threw 2 incompletions or 1 or something crazy like that. But C.J. Stroud and Davis Mills were night and day in that preseason game. And it goes back to the guys that are around him. Dalton Schultz is probably the biggest name that the Houston Texans have, and he's a tight end. Nico Collins is their number 1 wide receiver. They have Robert Woods, who I don't think has played a full season in about 3 years now. And they've got Damian Pearson, that's nice, and Devin Singletary, which is actually kind of nice too. He actually had a really nice cut yesterday to make a first down, which was really sweet. But I don't know. The Texans' entire defense is a question mark. They have a rookie head coach in DeMeco Ryans, which is definitely a locker room move, a former player for them. And I just think that the Texans' goal this season is to just do better than last season. And I know that's everybody's goal, but for the Texans, their goal is to not win this division. Their goal is to not win 9 games. Their goal is to not have a top 5 pick again. And that should be expected when you draft a quarterback in the top 5 to hopefully not draft again in the top 5 the year after. But I just don't see much from this Texans squad on either side of the ball, really. You have unproven wide receivers with a rookie quarterback. I mean, even if they had Brandon Cooks, I would still probably give them a little bit more credit just because that's a proven guy and he's a veteran, but they don't even have that guy anymore. Robert Woods is considered that veteran guy, and he plays half a season every year. So if you put all those factors together, and I know the AFC South isn't really that much better than the NFC South, but I don't see CJ Stroud this season with this Texans team have much success. So I don't think he's going to have the best rookie season out of these 3 either.
James, go for it with the Colts, my man. Try to keep it a little bit shorter on time, although I know you got some quality to say on Anthony Richardson.
I do. And what I want to say about this first is I know he did have the most playing time out of the other 2 quarterbacks. He played the most drives, and I think he played 3, if I'm not mistaken. But with that being said, the playbook was wide open for Anthony Richardson. There was read options in there. There were play action passes. I mean, there were multiple plays where Anthony Richardson had to decide, am I going to keep this or am I just going to hand it off? And that's huge for a rookie quarterback to go out there in the very first game and to be able to have the opportunity to even do something like that. I think he's further along progress than a lot of people are giving him credit for. I know he had the worst collegiate career out of the 3 quarterbacks, and a lot of people are going to be pointing to that completion percentage, 52. It was horrible. And I'm not saying that that's gone. This is a new and revamped Anthony Richardson. But he had a read option, a screen pass to get out of pressure. I do want to talk about this interception because that is kind of the negative connotation that everyone's pointing to. His right guard got absolutely blown up on that play. He had no time to throw it, and he did throw it off his back foot, and it was a bad throw. So, but that's hogwash. You don't really need to dissect that too much. The offensive line didn't give him time. Now, he had 3 straight play action passes in this game. One was a 12-yard seam pass, which went for a first down. The other one was an 11-yard out route, which was an incompletion, but then there was a flag on the play for DPI. And then the very next play was a play-action deep ball to Alec Pierce, and Alec Pierce should have made that catch. It was a 40-yard dime, beautiful ball. Only Alec Pierce could have caught it, and he ended up dropping it as he hit the ground. He catches that ball there on the 1-yard line. Maybe could have been a touchdown. Could have gone either way. But that was the best throw of the 3 quarterbacks from all 3 games. Not only that, but he had a read option keeper in the red zone, which ended up going for 9 yards, but then it got called back for holding. So there was more hitches, which every quarterback's going to throw those and screen passes. But that's something that we're going to see a lot from this team because Shane Steichen came from Philadelphia with Jalen Hurts, and we saw how that offense was. And so we're going to see that translate over to Anthony Richardson. And I got to say, he looked a lot better than I was anticipating. Other than that interception, you could say that out of the three, he did look the most poised in the pocket. He didn't get sacked, which I think was huge because the Colts need somebody like that. And his accuracy was iffy, but there were a couple of throws where the linebacker was shading one side and he threw it to the opposite shoulder, which is what you're supposed to do. So there was a lot that I liked from this game, but I just know that it's going to get better as the weeks go on. I mean, with the offense already looking like this with him, it just gets me so excited. And Michael Pittman Jr. being there. And Jonathan Taylor actually got reported today. He's coming back to camp. So he will play this season. So stop trying to scare me with all these rumors that he's not going to play or whatever. He will be back there with AR5.
I think Anthony Richardson is a very dynamic quarterback. I think he possesses some traits that House of Highlights is just watering at the mouth waiting for this season. At some point, he'll have a miraculous touchdown, whether it be on the feet, in the air. He's going to have a couple that are just going to get spammed into my DMs from James. And they're going to look awesome. Now, James, to kind of nitpick something that you nitpicked about my Bryce Young argument, and really the only thing that you can nitpick about Bryce Young is his height and his, I guess, health risk because of his height. But James, your quarterback is going to be running the most out of any of these rookie quarterbacks and very well could get injured. Probably just the same odds to get hurt this season as Bryce Young, I would say. Now, to kind of, for fun, contradict myself in my point earlier about not really putting a lot of stock into interceptions in the preseason, James, that interception was pretty god-awful from Anthony Richardson. I mean, he faked the handoff, started sprinting to his right, and then just chucked it out of nowhere, completely out of rhythm, and it wasn't even close to the receiver. Now, I've seen a guy named Cam Newton possess a lot of great running quarterback traits, big pocket presence, and everybody was hopeful for the day that he could become that, elite passing quarterback when it comes to accuracy from the pocket. And he just never quite could be that. Now, he was an MVP, got to the Super Bowl, all that stuff, but when we actually sit down and think about it, we've never seen a quarterback with similar traits and skill sets to Anthony Richardson actually turn into the quarterback that everybody hopes him one day to. Lamar Jackson, we're still waiting for him to be on that next tier of a passer. Justin Fields, we're still waiting for him to be on that next tier of a passer. Cam Newton, he never was. Mike Vick maybe was here and there, but we've never officially seen it, and I feel like Anthony Richardson might have a very dangerous rookie season that might lead to a lot of losses and a lot of turnovers, but long-term he could be something with that O-line, with some supporting cast, and with some decent coaching and play calling, and a lot of tutoring up in the film room and working on the accuracy. He could become into something, but I think you guys are in for a nasty rookie year.
Can I just say something really quick? You make a good point about all those other running quarterbacks. But what's the one thing Anthony Richardson doesn't have that all those other running quarterbacks have? Right. And that's a good college career. Those guys all had egos coming into the league. Those guys have already set in their own ways. You think Cam Newton was really trying to improve his passing? No, he's going to go out there and ball because he knows what he's good at. The same thing with Lamar. You saw that little stubbornness from him. Anthony Richardson doesn't have that. He doesn't have an ego to rely back on. Oh, I was this man.
You're saying because he was a worse quarterback in college that he has a higher upside because he was worse.
Lamar and Cam both won Heismans. They were both worshipped, idolized at their respective colleges. Look at Louisville. They retired his number, for Christ's sake. They are idolized at their colleges. So they already come into the league with this ego. I'm already good. I'm already that guy. Anthony Richardson didn't do crap in college. He still has stuff to prove.
All right. We'll save this debate for another day. Want to squeeze in here between both of you. Obviously, that's impossible for me to do in real life, but whatever. Point is, James, you kind of touched on a couple things I wanted to touch on trying to rip your quarterback apart. And you brought up that he didn't do anything in college. And that's kind of the point that I'm referring back to, which is he really didn't do anything in college. He was there at Florida for 3 seasons. He was the quarterback in and out for 2 seasons, wasn't given the complete and total starting job, and then was given the starting job last year. So let's look at what he did last year. In the 2 games, James, that he had big star ball-out numbers in, against Tennessee and against Vanderbilt, which was his 2 best college games. Against Tennessee, he went 453, had 2 touchdowns and an interception. And against Vanderbilt, he went for 400 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. Both games, he completed just slightly over 55% of his passes, 24 for 44 against Tennessee, 25 for 42 against Vanderbilt. In both of those games, he had QBR ratings above 150, 151 against Tennessee, 158 against Vanderbilt. So he wasn't totally accurate, but he was efficient in what he was doing. And yes, he ran, and he had 3 total touchdowns for more than 100 yards in both of those games combined. My point on this is he wasn't totally let loose. And when he was, they lost those 2 games. They lost against Vanderbilt. They lost against Tennessee. When Florida reined him in, controlled him, told him what to do, and told him how to do it, they won. He had a game against Eastern Washington, 8 of 10 for 240 yards, 2 touchdowns, but he was only 8 of 10. He was a completion percentage of 80%. He has 4 or 5 games in his entire college career they had under 200 yards. Florida did not want him completely loose. They controlled him, contained him as much as they could, and that's why I have praise for him going into the NFL. If Indianapolis can figure out how to let him loose and control him enough to run a balanced system in the NFL, he is going to have success, because he has proved it in a couple games where they just basically said, all right, Anthony, go nuts. We're not going to control you this game. Go loose, show us what you got. And yes, they didn't win, but that's also because Florida had a terrible defense for those few seasons. The best receivers Anthony Richardson had in college were Kyle Pitts and Kadarius Toney, and he had them for like 3 or 4 games before he went to the NFL. Those were his best players at Florida, period, end of story. He didn't have Bryce Young's wide receiver core. He didn't have, Bryce Young's dominant Alabama team. He didn't have C.J. Stroud's wide receiver core. He didn't have all of the great talent. He is going to be okay. I still think he's the second best quarterback out of the point is, he'll be the second best quarterback of all 3. That's just me. I think he's 2. I think he's behind C.J. Stroud. C.J. to me still has all the upside. But, James, I know you're going to touch on this after I talk. My point to you is, if Indianapolis can find a way to balance the system with him going nuts and still containing him to where he runs an efficient offense, I think the upside with Anthony Richardson is skyrocketed. The dude is tall. He is lengthy, 6'4", 236. He's big. He's athletic. He can run. He can scramble outside the pocket. He can do it all. I think he's the second best one out of all 3.
I don't got anything to add. I think I'm good.
All right, that's the Coin Flip Podcast here for you guys. Jacob Zimmerman, Jaimes Geren, Martin Kelly. We're talking about rookie quarterbacks on this episode. Guys, any last thoughts?
Oh, Colts Bears, week 2 preseason. I'm looking for that game.
Oh, you know what? That's going to be a fun one. All right.
I just remember that.
You know what, James? Text me afterwards. We might be able to put something together. Maybe a live stream, maybe just a live talk during the game. Who knows what we can do? No, I'm serious about it. If we can do that, that'd be fun.
We'll see. We'll see if I'm working or not. We'll see.
Get a little Yeah, a little bicker and banter. I'm okay with that. There's no problem there. So we'll see what we can do with that. But I will preview something, Jacob. You and I have the Bears and the Panthers later in the season. Unfortunately, we're none of us are playing the Indianapolis Colts. That would only be even more fun. But you know what? Maybe we do a live stream for that game. Maybe we do some live talk, whatever. But we're going to try to do a lot more content in the NFL this year. I think we're going to be really cool at it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Jacob, do you have anything to add to that?
I do have one thing to add, Martin. It's not even NFL related. We're going to have a video coming out on the Coin Flip podcast coming up. Not sure when this will be. It might be a couple weeks away or even sooner. But I'm going to be coming out with my top 25 players in the NBA, player rankings. I kind of made them for fun last year. I'll do a video on them this year, and we'll see if we get Martin and James to react to my top 25 players going into the 2023-2024 NBA season.
Of course, we're still months away from the NBA. No hate on the NBA. Hall of Fame was a couple nights ago. Greg Popovich, Tony Parker, Dwayne Wade, Paul Gasol, just a few names to add to that Hall of Fame class. Everything was so much
Dirk. Can't leave out Big Dirk.
I apologize. Obviously, Dirk, and I forget, was it Becky Hammond, the women's one that got elected? And Becky Hammond, who's been a tremendous, stellar player in the WNBA and was part of the NBA coaching staff with Greg Popovich. So a lot of great players, a lot of great stars. It was a great night for the NBA. Congratulations to all those who got elected into the Hall of Fame. Next year's Hall of Fame class should be another great Hall of Fame class. And yes, Jacob, we'll talk about the NBA. We know how much you love the NBA, so we'll get that in there for you, buddy. This is the Coin Flip Podcast, episode 1.5 million. Thank you guys for listening. Have a good one. Peace.
Yep.